Hey everybody, how we all doing today? Teching 101 here. Something feels a little off. You know what I'm saying? Something feels strange in the neighborhood. I don't know who to call, though. Can't quite know exactly. Oh, it's that. I'm sorry. You can't see it. It's off camera. Behold, the Royal Assembly of the Council of Berries. They're just all up there. They're up there. When you have to make the journey to the next plane of existence, they are there. The Council of Berries is the literal and metaphorical wall you must pass. That's what that is. So yeah. Anyway, today we're gonna be talking about God Valley. All right, little known island, barely mentioned in the story. Only mentioned like a single time. Not a lot of people talk about it. I am gonna be doing a Geography is Everything video on God Valley, but that's going to be. I'm gonna wait a little bit for that because I feel like we're going to get some more information regarding God Valley. So maybe a little bit presumptuous to make one now. We've already seen it once during Kuma's flashback. We got the general layout of the place, the most distinguishing characteristic being the two giant mountains, and then the valley in between the giant mountains, given the name God Valley. Actually, what is valley? What's the definition of a valley? That I totally don't have that queued up right here. A low area of land between hills or mountains, typically with river or streams flowing through it. Ah, I see, yes. Geography is fascinating. Topography, also fascinating. Yeah, so it's two giant mountains and then a valley in between, and that's where the town is, where the native hunting competition was held by the Tenryubito. And we also see in the last chapter, we see the town and we see a woman who is the mother of Shanks and Shamrock. So hopefully we'll find out more about her story and what's going on there. Okay, so a couple of things to break down before we even get into talking about the stuff from the last chapter, all right? So God Valley, very, very important to the One Piece story. We used to think it was just important because of the fact that the hunting competition was held there, and it was the clash between Rocks and Roger and Garp and the Gods Knights. That was kind of the whole idea that it was set up, and it was apparently wiped off the map. Not really sure if that means it was completely obliterated, or if it was like Buster called like Ohara. Like the physical island of Ohara is there. It's just like an off-limits zone. You can't trespass there by order of the world government, but the island is still there. Or if there was something else altogether, exactly. It was kind of ambiguous. At the very least, it's no longer found on any map, okay? So probably something maybe similar to Ohara, maybe? I always assumed the island was completely destroyed, and it's not there anymore, like it's sunk beneath the waves or something. There is something that kind of contradicts that, and we're actually going to start off with this. This was something I was going to bring up in the review, but I forgot to, and I kind of had the lead-in with it. I was talking about the Drunken Iron Ore. Okay, so this was something that was mentioned, I believe, only one time in the entire One Piece story. It was after Dressrosa. Remember that the revolutionaries were there at Dressrosa to conduct an investigation into Doflamingo's underground, underworld shipping operations, right? Okay, so you had Hack, and you had Koala, and you had Sabo. Koala broke into that underground port, and she started taking a bunch of pictures of all the cargo and everything, and that, I understand, wasn't, like, the main focus of Dressrosa. Like, we weren't, reading Dressrosa being like, man, I wonder what's going on with Koala's little side plot, But after the events, she goes back to Baltigo, and she does report on her fightings to Dragon. She mentions there was a substance, an ore, called Drunken Iron Ore that only a few islands in the world are able to produce. It is very rare, and you can use it to make really powerful weapons, okay? And that's why it was being traded on the black market, overseen by Doflamingo's operation, okay? So, Drunken Iron Ore, that's it. That's what it's called, okay? Now, something else that I wanted to mention that is relating to alcohol and God Valley. Do you remember the meeting that took place between Shanks and Whitebeard right after the events of Enies Lobby? Shanks arrived at the Moby Dick, knocked out a bunch of Whitebeard's crew members with his Conqueror's Hockey, and he was also carrying a giant jug of sake, a giant Whitebeard-sized jug of medicine. All right, by the way, side tangent, I love the fact that Whitebeard's character was based off of a dude that Oda actually knew. There was like a bar he used to go to, and there was this old guy that like lived in, like, I think he might have been the owner of the bar, but anyway, he was there, just like this grumpy old guy that always called sake medicine, and so Oda's like, yeah, you're gonna be a character. I don't think that guy's no longer with us, but like that he lives on as Whitebeard. Okay, so anyway, Whitebeard's there. He's all hooked up to his like machines and everything. He's got the sexy nurses all around him and everything, and he's meeting with Shanks, and he gives Whitebeard the present of the sake, as like a peace offering, right? And he talks to him about Ace and how he wants to bring him back. You need to recall Ace. He's running after Blackbeard. This is dangerous if you let him keep going, right? And so Whitebeard takes the drink, and he's like, sake from West Blue. Didn't know you were much of a cheapskate. You know what I mean? So, like, the implication is sake from the West Blue maybe has a reputation of not being that good, or maybe sake from any parts of the ocean that isn't from the Grand Line isn't really that famous. So Whitebeard's like, oh, you cheaped out. You basically brought some boxed wine to our, like, really important meeting and everything like that. Shows that you might not be serious. But Shanks is like, hey, don't, count it out just yet. That is sake from my hometown. It has a unique flavor. Give it a try. And so Whitebeard does. He's like, glug, glug, glug. Huh. Not bad. And that's all. That was like the introduction to the conversation. And then they get down to the brass tacks of talking about Ace and Blackbeard and everything like that. But that one little scene where Shanks brings alcohol from his hometown to Whitebeard. And now we know with 100% certainty, I mean, we didn't, actually. We did not know with 100% certainty that Shanks and Shamrock were from God Valley. We knew that Shanks was in a treasure chest that was found by Roger on God Valley. And we knew Garling was Shanks and Shamrock's father. But there was always the idea that they could have been born at Marijois and then brought to God Valley. And then shit hits the fan, Rox and Roger and Garp all show up, and one of the people were just like, hide the baby in the treasure chest. Pirates don't destroy treasure chests. At least they'll have a chance to live. I don't know. It was stated, I know, in like Viva cards and things like that Shanks was born in the West, but you never know 100%, exactly where this goes down. But yes, Shanks and Shamrock were born on God Valley 39 years ago, and we see that in the last chapter. So, does the fact that Shanks, when he's 37 years old, pre-time skip, bringing a giant jug of sake to Whitebeard and saying he got it from his hometown, doesn't that just immediately kind of confirm God Valley's still around? I mean, maybe. I mean, like, you also got to remember that the whole point of sake and wine in general is that when it's aged, it sort of tastes better, and that's kind of like, oh, yes, this is a 1422 from, Water 7 or Alabasta, port. I'm not a wine guy, you know what I mean? So it's just like, yeah, like, that might be the whole idea, so maybe that was some wine that Shanks was holding on to from his hometown. But the thing is, Shanks only spent a year as a baby in his hometown before God Valley, and then he was in the treasure chest, and then Roger found him, adopted him, and then it was on Roger's crew until he was 15, and then Roger was executed, and then apparently, we don't know, this is like the blank period in Shanks' life. We know he left Logtown, he asked Buggy to join him, Buggy said screw off and then left. We know at some point he met Yasopp. We know then from a flashback we got pretty recently, in the layers of all this flashback, at the beginning of this flashback, we knew he was visiting Scopper at one point at Elbaf. That was 14 years ago when Harald was killed, right? We know he was present for that, but a lot of parts of Shanks' life is still ambiguous. We know at one point he did return to Marijois, and apparently spent a few years there at the very least, and then decided to go back to being a pirate. So there's still a lot about Shanks' life we have to piece together. But I don't know, like, at what point would Shanks have been like, because the way he talked about that sake was like, oh yeah, my hometown. I've been there before. I've drank the sake from there before. Give it a shot, Whitebeard. It's really good. So, like, unless Shanks, as a baby, was being like, oh, okay, what are you going to give the child? Oh, let's give him some sake, unless that was happening, seems to imply at some point he went back to God Valley as an adult and got a real taste for the local wine there, the local sake, and then brought some, maybe stocked up on some there. I'm not saying Shanks went to God Valley immediately before meeting Whitebeard, but like, it has to kind of, like, line up at some point, right? Also, I mean, if God Valley was completely obliterated, like Buster called out of existence, then where would he even have gotten the wine? You know what I mean, right? So, the wine, the sake on that ship is kind of a big deal now, all right? Also, Drunken Iron Ore. Sake. Special flavor. I would assume it's called Drunken Iron Ore because it's related to alcohol in some way. I don't know. Maybe you take some of this ore and then you add it to the process of making sake and it makes it taste better. Or maybe, I mean, this is One Piece. This is a fantasy realm, right? So maybe it's just like you squeeze this ore or you purify the ore and it turns into a liquid that, like, you heat it up and it turns into sake with a really unique flavor. I don't know, but it's called Drunken Iron Ore, and there's a really rare, unique sake from Shanks' hometown, which is confirmed to be God Valley. So, like, there it is. You know what I mean? I'm just going to throw that out there. Okay. So now, moving on to the actual chapter, we get 1 page of information. So that's probably going to be about a 25-minute discussion in its own right. We have Garling arriving at Marijois 40 years ago. This is 1 year after the last hunting competition that the Tenryubito do, and 2 years prior to God Valley, 1 year prior to Shanks and Shamrock being born. And so he's meeting with the Gorosei, and he's saying, hey, I recommend that you hold the next tournament at God Valley. And the Gorosei are like, hey, the last one just ended, you're impatient. And he's like, listen, I was on another assignment, and I happened to stop by this island in the west, and they have a unique culture and a bunch of traditions, and they have a bunch of really rare natural resources. I asked them to join the government, couldn't do it, talks broke down, they refused, but I also discovered, in the official viz, he says, something preposterous there. Ooh, preposterous. That's a word you don't hear very often. Something preposterous that the Great One will surely be pleased with, and therefore I strongly recommend God Valley for the next hunting competition. All right, so the way this went down, Garling, as a God's Knight, was on an assignment. First of all, I don't even know what kind of assignments the God's Knights have. This is a thing because, like, we've never really seen the God's Knights up until these last couple of story arcs at all in the story. So whatever assignments they are going to be put on, it has to be higher than Cypher Pulls 1 through 8, higher than Cypher Pull 9, which is supposed to be secret, higher than even Cypher Pull Aegis 0, which is supposed to be directly under the Celestial Dragons, right? Like, this is really top-level, super, super secret stuff. Not exactly sure what kind of assignments they would be given. Okay, we know the assignment at Elbaf right now to bring the giants to heel, so maybe something on that level. I would assume whenever the God's Knights are on a mission to do anything, it's big world-changing, like, personally ordered by Emu type shit, okay? So this isn't even anything to do with that assignment, though. He was on this assignment, and on his way back, he ended up in the West, and he ended up docking at God Valley. Now, we see the mother of Shanks and Shamrock at the end of the chapter. We know Garling is the dad, and they even mention, like, oh, the dad's not around, so we'll help you raise the child. Don't worry, I'll raise the twins. Don't worry about that, right? So this is where Garling and Shanks and Shamrock's mom, I assume, met. Now, we don't know the exact dynamics with this. We know the Celestial Dragons are horrible and shitty, and, that's also confirmed because Garling is sitting right here in the Room of Authority saying to the Gorosei directly, hey, you know that native hunting competition we hold every 3 years where we round up a bunch of the citizens of unaffiliated nations and we hunt them for sport? Yeah, there's an island in the West that I just, met a woman and we had relations and 2 children are going to be born. Let's make that the next place to do it. Now, so that kind of shows Garling didn't give a shit about this woman, okay? Probably doesn't even know that she was pregnant. I'm not really sure how the dynamic works with, like, God's Knights, because, like, Shanks and Shamrock are the children of a God's Knight. We know Shamrock is currently a God's Knight. Shanks also was, or at least offered the position for a time, but Garling is also saying, kill everybody on the island, right? And then, like, so what? Was Garling on God Valley and then being like, wait a minute, I have kids here? How could that be? Oh, wait a minute, yeah. It seems a little bit weird, and I'm not really sure, like, how new God's Knights are added to the ranks under that, precept or whatever, okay? So I have an idea the way that this probably went down, right? We know the God's Knights and the Tenryubito are awful. In the scene at the end of the chapter, it didn't seem like the woman that is the mother of Shanks and Shamrock. She seemed fine. She seemed healthy. She didn't seem like horribly traumatized by her, experience with Garling or anything like that. So I'm thinking the way this probably went down was that Garling went to the island and he's like a celebrity because he's a God's Knight and everything like that. So even though this island might not have been affiliated with the world government, I don't know, maybe they might have known about him anyway or something at the very least. And Garling meets this woman, and maybe the woman is like smitten with him, and he is just like a devious piece of shit that just like says all the right things just to have, his way with her. And then as soon as the following morning, he skips out, right? And she is just like maybe Garling might have even said some shit like, oh, hey, don't worry, after together, the two of us will get married and we'll go off to Marijois together and we'll live in opulence for all time, right? And then she's like, oh my God, this is great. And then the following day, he's gone, and then she's pregnant, and then she realizes, yeah, this was all just a ploy, like he didn't care. Or maybe she still thinks that like, oh no, he's gonna return, he's gonna come back, and we're gonna be a happy family, right? So there's a few different ways that this could have went, right? At the very least, he doesn't seem to give a shit about the woman. Let's assume that he doesn't know that she was pregnant with his kids. So he doesn't seem to give a shit about this woman because immediately he's like, yeah, let's make this the next place that we're going to hunt down all of the civilians and kill them for sport. All right, and we already knew Garling was a piece of shit. Like, this isn't like new news or anything like that, right? This is not big news. So what could have been on this island, aside from the resources? I think the Drunken Iron Ore plotline is going to tie back into this island, but I don't think that was the thing that was so preposterous that he brings up to the Gorosei, and he says that Emu would really enjoy it. He does mention rich in resources that would be a great benefit. That was probably the ore, but there was something else. So I've seen like a bunch of like theories about this, like everything from, oh, it turns out that it's something relating to like Joy Boy's grave, to the ancient weapon Oranos could be there. Certainly you want to stop for a moment and take a step back and think about the things that Emu gives a shit about. Okay, if you're going to report something directly to the Lord Emu of the entire world, right? Like, I don't think Emu is going to give a shit about some rocks. Well, actually, we know Emu didn't give a shit about rocks because they were just having that conversation in the room. Emu was just like, yeah, I don't care. You broke into the room of authority. You can't use kings and queens as like a bargaining chip with me. Piss off, right? So we know Emu does not give a shit about rocks or rocks, okay? So what does Emu give a shit about? All right, well, Emu gives a shit about Lily, kind of in a creepy way. Same thing with Vivi. So it's definitely something there. So it might involve Vivi or Lily. Gives a shit about the ancient weapons, I would say anything involving the before time, right? Like anything before the third age. So going back to the second age and then into the first age, anything in that area or that zone that could possibly be utilized by the world government or could be used against them in the current. Because that's probably the only thing that Emu's really worried about is like, Emu controls the world government. They have the Marines. They have the Cypher Pole. They have the God's Knights. They have all these really powerful military arm of the world. Yes, the pirates are opposing them, and that's a problem. But at the end of the day, they also have the giant fuck-off laser cannon weapon, right? So Emu's probably thinking, the only things that would challenge my reign of the entire world is technology and weaponry from the Second Age or before. Right? If someone gets their hands on the other ancient weapons, that's a problem. If somebody gets their hands on something like technology, we assume the first age was like somewhat contemporary to us. If they find, if you ever see Beneath the Planet of the Apes, the second one, which clearly is not as good as the original Planet of the Apes, but in the second movie, when they send that other astronaut to go look for Taylor, and that's basically like, yeah. So they find like, I think a nuclear bomb under the Planet of the Apes, which is Earth, and it's like, this is the nuclear bomb that we worship, and at the end of that movie, it detonates, right? Okay, so what if it's something like that? What if there is like a nuke from the first age somewhere, and it's like, whoa, we found the cache of nuclear weapons or something. Not sure if a nuclear bomb would still be working, like after 3,000 or 4,000 years, but it's One Piece, maybe, okay? Those would be the things that Emu would care about. What else does Emu give a shit about? Butterflies? They could be butterfly related, could be something related to the poneglyphs. Emu cared about the poneglyphs, called them those like horrible, troublesome stones, those loathsome objects, those loathsome things that should not even exist, so it was something along those lines. Just in general, because I feel like Emu knows the whole story, right? Emu knows about the Will of D. Emu knows the true history. Emu knows about the Void Century. That's the whole point. Emu was there, right? So they know about everything. It's anything that the world at large could learn about the Void Century, Emu cares about, right? And we even hear this when Gunko and all the Gods Knights were on Elbaf. They even kind of said, like, the world was supposed to sink into the ocean, and that was supposed to be it. Nobody was supposed to know about that. Thanks, Vegapunk. Right? Okay, and so Emu knew, the Gods Knights knew, the Gorosei knew. They just didn't want the world to find out, and then mass panic and chaos and shit might hit the fan, right? And so, by the way, we have still yet to see, like, the proper fallout from Vegapunk's message worldwide. I think we're going to get that, like, after Elbaf, when we go in between the story arcs. We're going to see, like, probably nations that have been, like, overturned overnight, and then a bunch of, like, citizens freaking out, and a bunch of, like, soothsayers on the street corners that's just like, the world's gonna end, a great flood. Everybody's trying to build ships. Everybody's flocking to Water 7. You know for a fact Iceberg and Galila are up to here with requests for ships and giant, hey, can you make a giant boat? Hey, Tilestone, we have a lot of orders for arcs this week. We have to make, like, all these kingdoms are requesting we make giant arcs for them to survive, right? So, like, we still need to see the fallout from that and everything like that, but those are the things that Emu cares about. Okay, so something related to the ancient weapon, sure. I mean, Emu got their hands on the giant fuck-off sky laser, which we assume is Uranus. When did Emu get that? Right? We look at Lulusia, and we see the devastation that thing wrought, and then we also look at Eni's Lobby, which also clearly was also another target of that weapon, right? But Eni's Lobby is all built up, like there's like, it's a government island, there's a bunch of like buildings and cities there and everything like that, so the blast that caused the hole in the ocean by Eni's Lobby, that did not happen in recent history. That did not happen just 10, 20, 30 years ago. That was probably during the Void Century, during the big giant war, and then that's when it was used there. And then somewhere the ancient weapons were stored or sealed away. Pluton ended up under Wano. Poseidon is Shirahoshi. And Uranus could have been at God Valley. So God Valley becomes even more relevant. It wasn't just relevant because it involves Kuma's backstory or the Rocks Pirates backstory or Roger or Garp or anything. It also clearly is something relevant to Emu, okay? So that could be something preposterous. I could definitely see that there. It also something that might be just like the remnants of that first age. Like God Valley could have been a city during the first age or something like that. And, Garling was out scouting the island and looking around, and he's finding all these relics and things from the first era, like similar to the facility on Elbaf, But yeah, suffice to say, there's a lot of really great theories out there right now on exactly what was found on God Valley. I think all of them are fairly viable. If you want to say it's Joy Boy's grave, I could see that. If you want to say it's Uranus, I could definitely see that as well. Absolutely. Okay, now, something else, though, tying back into the beginning, what happened to God Valley, the island, after the events 38 years ago? We know Roger, Garp teamed up to fight and kill Rox. We know the Rox crew separated. We know Kuma and Ivankov and Ginny were there, and Kuma got the pawpaw fruit, and Big Mom got her hands on the Ua Ua no Mi and gave it to Kaido, and that's where he got his powers. We know that Kuma saved about 500 people and got off the island. We know Garling was there with a bunch of other Gods Knights, and apparently also at the time his children. We don't really know exactly the full story there on how did Shanks end up in the treasure chest, who was Shanks' mother, and Shamrock's mother. I mentioned this woman that we see in the flashback. I should have also brought up, this might have been the queen of the island, because she was right behind the king, and the king was like, how dare you invade our island, and then immediately Garling cuts his head off, and this woman rushes over and is like, no, your majesty, right? So She could have been just a woman living on the island. She could have been the queen of the island. Not really sure. I also mentioned in the review, because she has red hair. That's why Shamrock and Shanks have red hair. Garling is blonde. This woman has red hair. And they even mentioned on the island they inherited her red hair. Well, she has blonde hair when we see her 38 years ago in the manga. And then also in the anime, she has blonde hair, so she might not be the same person. But I did throw out the idea, well, maybe she just dyed her hair. But then I start thinking, like, as kind of a joke. But then I start thinking about it, and I'm like, well, wait a minute here. If this woman was, like, in love with Garling, and Garling was saying all these, like, you know, these things about, like, oh, yes, sure, you know, you will be my bride, and we will go back, and we will live at Marijuari, yada, yada, yada. This woman, maybe she was, like, you know, told or asked to, like, you gotta dye your hair, though, or something. Like, I don't know. Or maybe she thought, like, I will dye my hair blonde, just like Garling's. I don't know, but, like, maybe it could be. I bring it up because we just don't know any other. Like, she's the only woman that's kind of, like, focused on it all in the manga, and then in the anime as well, we focus on her for a little bit. So it's, like, literally grasping at straws. Like, there's, like, nobody else really to focus on other than her. And so it's probably going to be somebody completely different, I would assume, right? But Garling was there. So did he know, or did he learn? Like, when they arrived, did he meet this woman? Did he meet Shanks and Shamrock's mom? Did they have a conversation? Did he learn that he has kids? Well, apparently he did, and apparently he accepted, like, oh, you were pregnant. Oh, I have kids. I have sons. Oh, okay. Well, they're going to be raised to be God's Knights. You are not going to be so lucky, though. Like, it could have been just something as evil as that, right? Like, it could have just been like, oh, okay, I have sons. All right, well, I'll take them back, and then I'll raise them to be just like me and be God's Knights. You are going to stay on the lower realm and get killed, though, in this competition. I'll make sure to ascribe a point value higher, though, for you. You know, oh, God, what if Garling was the one that actually, like, if she's dead, which... it's not looking great for Shanks and Shamrock's mom. What if Garling was the one to actually, like, do it as, like, part of the competition? God, that would be so messed up. But once again, fits perfectly with the vibes of the Celestial Dragons and the God's Knights, and especially Garling, okay? So, yeah, that's where we're at right now, and, like, after the events of the battle... clearly God Valley was stricken from the record, and it was removed from the maps and everything like that, and there was an article written about it by Morgans back in his younger years, and we know that Garp was applauded as the hero of God Valley, and God Valley, I guess, was mentioned in the article, but this was 38 years ago. It kind of faded away into the annals of history. Nobody really knows about it much anymore, but the actual physical island might still be there. And then there's other theories about God Valley being Thriller Bark. The geography and the size of the island look completely different. Although it's not impossible if those two large mountains were, like, obliterated, which could definitely have happened during all the crazy battles that went on there. Maybe you want to say the battle obliterated the mountains and then cracked the island apart. Because I feel like God Valley's bigger than Thriller Bark. Thriller Bark was big enough to be, an island, and it was a ship as well. But at a certain point, it just kind of gets absurd, right? So maybe the island got cracked up into a bunch of different pieces. The mountains collapsed. And so God Valley, as it originally was, is no longer there. But there might be 4 or 5 other island chunks, one of which was turned into Thriller Bark, and the rest could be like an archipelago now. So, like, it has a different name, but still technically God Valley. And the people that live there, at least the old-timers might, like the survivors, might remember back before all that shit happened. And are they still members of the world? I mean, did they become members of the world government after the fact, or are they still unaffiliated? Not really sure how that went down. But anyway, that's what happened. That's the video. Let me know down below on all this stuff, and what do you think is the preposterous thing that Garling found there. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Teching, signing out. Say farewell to the Council of Berries. Farewell.